Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we will be doing a watercolor painting, a landscape painting, pretty fast and loose, wet and wet. If you are new to this channel, I like to take a few moments to set up at the beginning of these videos because I'm live streaming them, and it gives a few people time to jump in and I can interact with them in real time. So if you're watching this at a later date and you don't want to see the setup, feel free to jump ahead. It'll probably take like 3 minutes for us to get started. So without further ado, we have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua in front of us, and the first thing that I like to do is to completely saturate the paper with fresh water. Now, a lot of the times, this is the way I start every painting, but once in a blue moon, might something start off where it's not completely saturated, but today's not that day. I like to use the hake brushes. These are by Pro Art and Cheap Joe's Art Stuff, but it's the same hake. It's the Ranson hake. I think they might have just branded it for different companies. It's a hake brush that is pre-worn and has a chiseled edge compared to regular hake brushes, which are often fluffy. So a regular hake brush, you could use it to put down copious amounts of water and washes. This hake brush will allow for different textures, and you'll see in a bit. I don't really use this large one for the painting process anymore. I use the medium, but this one's good for really getting it soaked quick. I'm also thinking that this one just has years of life on it of use. This guy, I want to say, probably had him for 2 years now. It's pretty beat up and stiff, but it's still going strong. So we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to use the same palette as yesterday. However, I might do something a little bit different. Yesterday, I used Payne's Gray, Phthalo Blue, and Sap Green, and Venetian Red. I used that mixture combination of the red and the green to get a brown, and due to the drying shift that'll often take place, and then we'll mix in Phthalo Blue, Payne's Gray, or Ultramarine to kind of shift the green to darken things up. And yesterday's experiment, we also did a little bit of a highlight at the very end with some white gouache to try to get the light to trickle across the land. So that was yesterday's. And today I'm going to continue with that, and I think I'm also going to experiment with yellow ochre. I poured a little bit out on the palette, but we'll see. I think this hake is a little dirty, but that's fine. It works for us. Oh wait, yeah, because we just got that. All right. Without further ado, start getting everything wet. Sometimes I spray the palette down. I didn't do that right there. I put my water spray bottle away. I'm in the process of like organizing, keeping things nice and neat. So you put something away and then you're like, oh, well, do I even really need it to go grab it? So I got nice quantities. And with this one, I don't have much of a scene in mind. I will do the light source coming from this direction, I believe. And I'm starting to try to establish light source directions more, mainly so it's just easier for me to put my light and dark tones in, as well as that trickling effect with the white gouache at the end. So just flatten the paper, and we'll start seeing what we can create. We're really not that super wet and wet for some reason. So the fun one way about this approach is that you can really kind of just let wild and let your subconscious take over and create masses and structures. Sorry, a little froggy. Why do I not have much water going? We find that spray bottle. Oh, we have somebody in the live chat. How y'all doing? It's I guess Feel would be the person's name in the chat. So I'm just kind of getting things going. I'm kind of off to a little rocky start with this one. Not sure why I didn't get my paper totally saturated, but that spray bottle should fix everything. So once again, Payne's Gray, Sap Green, and Venetian Red. This is going to be our main color combination. I'm not sure why the chat room isn't working on here. Let me see if I can open an app. I have a little Kindle alongside me that lets me see if people are talking rather than me standing up and checking my phone, which I use to film this. Okay, so we'll have light from back here. The fun thing with this approach is even with watercolor, I can put a whole bunch in like that, and then I could take a rag and start swiping things around. These two colors aren't really staining colors, so I don't have too much of an issue with that. And you could just go back in and lift, and that'll dry those areas, so you could get potentially hard edges if you want, or you could just go back in and wet them again. And those of you in the live chat, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to ask them. And also, how y'all doing? Y'all having a good day? I think today's Thursday afternoon. I didn't really sleep the best last night. So with this one, build up structures, build up tonal values. We're gonna have the light come across. We're gonna have it highlight the edges. It's not gonna be the final result. We're just gonna go back and forth. In fact, we may even experiment with a sharp edge of light coming in right here. But we'll see. Make this kind of a stream. Have our foreground. So it's almost like oil painting, this technique, where you can just go back and forth, adding and subtracting. If you use charcoal, it's kind of like the charcoal technique as well. Though, if you ever use charcoal, you'll know how messy that is. I refuse to use charcoal in the house. I had charcoal work that I had picked up from my parents that had been at their house since I was in college, and before I even got it out of the old room, it was in my old room there, I had charcoal all over me. I didn't spray it with a fixative. let this really come out rather than being too much of an L-shaped composition. We can let this come down further, and we'll do an overlap. So we could open this area up. And with this one, don't be afraid about the paper towel touching other areas and lifting that. Just literally, it's the definition of just letting loose and having fun. You may prefer to use paint straight from the tube for this method to lay down copious amount of pigment. These two paints, the sap green and the Venetian red, are Da Vinci brand, which is a pretty affordable brand of paint, and you get a good quantity. I think they're 37 milliliter tubes. In fact, let me show you one of those tubes under the guise of me putting out more paint, or yeah, put out more paint under the guise of showing you guys these tubes. You get a lot out of these. I think I've gone through ultramarine tube of this brand. I just like it. I think it's just a really good step up. I'm not like affiliated with them in any way, but for the price, it can't be beat. So you'll see how much pigment I wind up picking up in a moment. So I gotta be a little bit careful. So it's just a lovely brown with hints of green and red in it. I'm gonna pile it on. I'm gonna go to town. And then come right back, and you can just use a paper towel to lift out a texture. And just try not to repeat any patterns. And whether or not this technique has a name, I'm not sure. But if you like watching this channel, you'll notice that I really like dark and moody tonal variety paintings. Kind of looks like a grisaille, which is the underpainting in an oil painting, which is usually monochromatic. Building up this. Wipe out trunks. If you don't like them, go right back over them. You could also do the same thing with the rigger brush. So we haven't mixed any other pigments in, and I'll probably get to that stage in a moment. Just kind of getting a feel for where everything's going to be. In fact, I'm going to take the rigger to soften this up. just do wet and wet strokes. They'll be very faint, but they'll come through. It's all about building up that illusion. Lift that out right there. Get that pure white of the paper, as least white as I can get. Lift these guys out some so that they get the glow of the light, and we'll texture over it. This wouldn't catch as much light, so it's a imaginary scene, so I have to start thinking in terms of that. I'll take phthalo blue now to mix into this, and to start getting dark, so I could use the Payne's gray as well. And like I said, ultramarine blue can be used. There's kind of little guys to shift it back and forth. What I'll do is try to get a dark structure here with its shadow coming out to the side. Okay. Payne's gray. Let's see. Just toning the sky, essentially. This corner darken up. All right. Lift the little edges where it would catch the light coming from that side. I'm gonna grab ultramarine blue. And I'll use that for a few darks on that shadow side. You can play around with little brush marks back here for trees. Okay, now we have the closer landmass. blue. Cast a little bit of reflection. Just wipe it to the side. Cast that shadow back here on the back side of this tree. Go for like a super dark. The dark side of this foreground mass that's coming up. This is going to be a little bit off the edge of the mat. I'm going to bring that up and over. Structures of trees up here. This will kind of be like stopping the eye from going off the page, but also a little bit place for me to catch some highlights at the end. We'll get back to that. Darken this. And right there the mat's going to cover, but I like to go edge to edge. Yeah, I put out a little bit of that ochre, yellow ochre. I'm just going to put some out just to see. It's almost kind of like a little potential lighting for the foreground. We'll play it by ear. It may not work in this one. We really want to darken up the inside of here. Now at this point, you just kind of play around, darken it up, add your textures. You could do a dry off and then pass over everything with the texture, but everything's kind of drying enough where I can either get that contrast from the strokes, or I could just wet those areas with a wetter hake. dark, dark, dark. Payne's gray. Just look at this little foreground here. Look at it through the viewfinder, see what I want to do with it. So unfortunately, I don't think I really like the yellow ochre in this palette. I know I didn't do much of it. We'll have to see. But now, at this point, I'll start darkening things, and then I'll start playing with the like gouache. I think I'll also put a few elements that'll cast shadows to show the direction of light. If I do this is something I was thinking about. I had an element like this in another painting where it was the old gnarled stump, but then it broke off to be about here. Let's get this kind of tree to fall down, and then we'll let the light travel along that. That's my idea anyway. So shadow wise, I'm going to cast here, it's going to cast overgrowth. Sometimes those stumps will have that growth coming out of it. And then we'll come back here think it's a pretty interesting, whimsical scene. I'll have to do a dry off in a moment, and then we'll play with the black and white gouache. Some growth, little things popping up, little twigs. Maybe they'll catch a little bit of that light on them. That should be an interesting shadow. Let it sit like that. Okay, so I am just going to move this palette out of the way and grab my gouache palette. I like to have two separate palettes for those, or containers, because the one gouache will contaminate the other. It will contaminate the watercolor. So we do a dry off. We'll see how the color shift looks, and then we'll see what needs to be kind of darkened up. Oh, gotta plug in my blow dryer. It's not completely dry, but dry enough for the next part, I believe. Let's see if we're flat. We put a lot of paint on there. Put out some fresh white gouache. I use the Da Vinci brand gouache as well. It's just price point. The company works for me, you know, with the permanence and the affordability. So that's why I go with them. I want black. That's enough because I'm just using like a little bit. I am thinking about like putting in some pure white in the sky right in here. I wonder how that would look. Should I do it? Should I make that part of today's experiment? So I'm gonna kind of have to tickle it in there, I guess. Just a bright source of light. So that's the experiment with this. That'll make up for the lack of yellow ochre. Playing around with that. That kind of gradient out. looks a little weird. Let's see. In person, it doesn't look too bad. Okay. I want to kind of play with this path of light. Let's see how it's looking through here. Okay, now I want it to come down here. Catch a few points. Catch a few highlights right along there. Kind of get the light to kind of travel a little bit across it, and they show up a little bit. They're very faint, but I think that might be what I want. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so that should be enough for that white gouache. Let me not do that. I wanted to soften that edge a little bit. There's just too much water going in. Okay, let's get the black gouache. Small highlights of black gouache just to all right, let's dry it off, see where we're at now. Drop the blow dry. Let's see, are we happy with that? I wonder if there'd be another band of white right here. Yeah, I might have to make it narrower in the future. But let me grab that. Fortunately, if we try to paint over gouache, we get a weird highlight effect. So I don't want to do that. I do want to add a little texture in this spot, though. A little bit of reflection coming down. Alright, so we'll call it at that. I hope you enjoyed this watercolor tutorial. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow. If you ever have any questions or comments, let me know. Oh, we got Equal Mage coming in the chat. You like it? This one, I experimented with white gouache, which is just an opaque white, and I put it in here, and there's like a weird horizon effect that seems to show up with like concentrated light sources that I don't quite understand yet, but it shows up in the paintings of Burstad, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, so I wanted that there, and I also wanted little smidgens of white just to kind of trace highlights. I don't know if they creep along a little weird or not, but yeah, that was the experiment for this one. I appreciate the compliment. Let me just sign it. If I signed with the white pen, I probably would have defeated the purpose of having just little areas of white, and it would just jumped out against the other ones. So with a mat over it, let's see how that looks. And that's today's watercolor painting. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.